We can start with the beginning of this. Hold my hand, feel the touch of your body, cling to mine. You and me making love all the way through another night. I remember you and I walking through the park at night, kiss and touch, nothing much, let it flow, just touch and go. Love you more, never leave me alone by a house of love. People talk, people say, what we have is just a game. Oh no, I'll never let you go. Come here, girl, hey. Just got to make sweet love till the break of dawn. I don't want the sun to shine, I want to make love. Here's this magic in your eyes or in my heart. I don't know what I'm gonna do, can't stop loving you. It won't stop till the break of dawn, making love. Welcome back to our Dominion Energy virtual Jazz Cafe. I'm sad to start tonight because Victor Brooks, our guest, can't be with us. Last week, we almost didn't get to be with Victor Brooks II for a similar reason. It's my family, they have my heart. So things happen in life. And my family needs this time to themselves. But I can't wait to get to introduce you to Victor, Uncle Victor, in the future. So tonight I thought, can't really get anyone to be with us on this short notice. So I want to spend an evening with you, just we two, if you'd allow me. Next week, we are not slated to have a jazz program, but because we're not going to have our regular discussion tonight, I think I'm going to try to squeeze one in for you because there's so much more information I want to cover. I've got 3 more dynamic and exciting talks on this series I want to get through before we launch the next iteration of Jazz Cafe, which will bring to us more music like we're accustomed to, some more conversation. Yes, we're going to learn together. But we're gonna listen together a little bit more in the future. So this evening, since you're tuned in with me, since we love each other dearly, I thought I would talk to you a little bit more about the journey we've been on with jazz from my eyes. I'd like to share with you a little bit more about who I am in this conversation, in this little moment that we get to spend with one another. And perhaps talk about some things coming up in the future from VMFA, in particular from performing arts. Now, I didn't expect to be your whole screen, so maybe y'all got a good makeup artist, somebody come do my hair. I can look a little better for you. So we've covered so far with our jazz series, Strange Fruit. We talked with Valerie Cassell Oliver at length about that topic, about the song, the words, other art happening that supports the story, other music happening that comes out around the same time. Then we moved on from covering a song and an artist to the beginning of something beautiful, the birth of jazz, the 1920s. And Jeremy Winston walked us very well from the boat ride, as Vic likes to call it, to today, the Great Migration, moving sounds around in this country, the advent of the recording industry and of radio, capturing these sounds and taking it and spreading it around the world, right? We talked with Jeremy a lot about improvisation and how jazz relates to improvisation, and improvisation is a big part of it. You just heard me improvise all over this piano music that's written, but that I'm not reading. I'm just making up because I'm sitting at a piano today. And I want to talk, we're going to get a little bit more improvisation. Now, it's an important part of this journey to me, because improvisation doesn't start with jazz. Of course it exists and it's a big part of it, but I want to talk about some other things, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But then we moved on to Victor Brooks II. And that conversation touched my heart. We heard Vic sing, "Father, Father, there's far too many of you." You know, singing that beautiful Marvin Gaye piece. And then he got one verse and a little tear fell from his eye. I love you, cousin. Tonight, we're gonna engage with me, and then at the end, I'm gonna sing for you again, and I'll talk about that song when I get to it. Very personal to me. Not necessarily jazz, but who's to say it's not? I am, and I say it's something beautiful about it. So jazz. I first encountered jazz as a child, I'm sure, but we didn't listen to jazz in my home regularly growing up as a small child. I don't know if Jeremy did. I'm sure Vic did. Listen to some jazz growing up, especially in a home where somebody like Nancy Wilson or Nina Simone might pop through. You never know who's going to show up and how you didn't once upon a time. Fond memories of that. Some fond, some a little bit annoyed because I didn't understand who these people were, and they were playing the piano that I wanted to play, and I couldn't get on it because somebody else had to have a seat. But you learn as you grow up. When I was in 8th grade, maybe 9th grade, I began to experiment with names that were familiar to me. Names like Ella Fitzgerald. Knew who she was, but I didn't know too much more. Billie Holiday, Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong. And I sort of stopped there. Those are the artists I was learning jazz from. Once upon a time, Ella Fitzgerald was teaching me to sing in a way I hadn't sung in the past. I'm an opera singer, classical music, oratorio. I'm great with that sort of singing, my big full voice. But I had never needed to soften it or smooth it out or take out the vibrato and sing a jazz tune. And so I started with Ella Fitzgerald. Look at me, I'm as helpless as a kitten up a tree. You know, Misty was, I think, the first jazz tune I tried to work on. And my mom didn't know this, that I was experimenting with these sounds, with these singers, but began to take notice. And she then introduced me to Strange Fruit, really, of Billie Holiday's. She introduced me to In My Solitude, then God Bless the Child, another great one that I have not yet mastered. I've got to get that in my fingers. It's beautiful, beautiful tune. And I began to study Billie and the way she sang. It struck me then that while this music was, to my ear, very new and very interesting, this voice I was hearing coming from Billie Holiday startled me. I had never heard anything like that. I'd heard voices like Ella Fitzgerald, so smooth and melodic, and I'd heard classical musicians and singers. Bryn Terfel, my mother really wanted me to listen to, great baritone, don't get me wrong. Paul Robeson, another. And I was hearing these great big voices that were not grainy, maybe, that weren't quite as edgy as Billie's voice sounded to me then. It's certainly a different sound than like a Nancy Wilson, you know, or Ethel Waters or something. But poignant and beautiful, and the message behind what she was singing resonated with me. You know, not always were Billie Holiday's songs uplifting, you know, too terribly peppy. Not that she was depressing by any means, but you know, you're moody when you're in high school, and so In My Solitude resonated with me. I wanted to be alone. You haunt me with memories, days long by, you know, always heartbroken, sit in my chair filled with despair, you know, resonated with me. I had not yet understood who Nina Simone is. And I think it was then that my mother decided she would introduce me to Nina. Been around the family long enough, but doesn't mean anything. I knew a lot of musicians. I know a lot of musicians who I didn't know were what they were then. And Nina Simone, I think Mom gave me Strange Fruit for the first go round, and she wanted me to hear the difference between what Nina Simone does and what Billie Holiday does. And it was quite striking to hear the very haunting, the very dramatic Nina Simone's telling of the story of Strange Fruit, the way she touches that piano, the way she breathes through the phrases, the way she uses her voice to paint the picture in a way that Billie Holiday didn't do. Billie Holiday, of course, sings it and tells us the story, and we were moved by it, and we learned more about it, and it was new, and it was gutsy then. Maybe even still is. And I grappled with that for a long time before learning things like Pirate Jenny from Nina Simone, right? And hearing her play things, Love Me or Leave Me. Oh my goodness, when I first heard her play, but I say love me, leave me, let me be lonely. Man, to hear somebody tickle those keys like that in such a way and then come in with that, I don't know, that bounce to the way she sang, and then that piano breakdown in the middle of that recording. Love me, leave me, let me be. Beautiful. And I was hooked from then. My fingers were becoming acquainted with playing the piano. I had learned Hero of Mariah Carey. And then I had to learn Small Enough by Nicole Nordman, introduced to me by a girl I went to high school with. Hi, Elisa. I learned that next, and then some more Nicole Nordman for myself, and then my mother needed me to learn something, so I did, and my fingers began to play. And as I learned and experimented, I continued to reflect on pianists like Nina Simone, or composers like Duke Ellington, vocalists like Billie Holiday. These musicians began to fascinate me. I understood very well by that time Handel and Mozart, Beethoven, Brahms, Mendelssohn. I understood very well what those musicians were and how they used music. Very well for, being 13 or 14 years old. But I didn't understand these new sounds. And it took me all of high school really to grapple with what I was learning and to engage with more singers like Al Jarreau. My goodness, I learned so much from Al Jarreau. Curtis Stigers, discovering him in college, but vocalists like these men were great. Until then, I think I'd been listening to women sing, because my mother is a woman. Of course, she's my mother. And she was my teacher, my inspiration, my grandmother as well. Plenty of men in my family sang, but I didn't hear them as much as my mother and my grandmother. And I didn't see them sitting at a piano or an organ like I did my grandmother. And so to discover these men who I could use as models for what I wanted to be was exciting. Beyond there, my experience with music took me to the world of opera, where I lived for a very long time. A lot of Mozart, a lot of Figaro, oratorio then, Mendelssohn, Brahms, Mozart, Duruflé, Debussy, Handel, Bach, whoever you can think of. They gave me this music and I learned it. From early music to contemporary music. But along the way, studying, getting a degree, they did not teach me jazz. I did not encounter Duke Ellington, except in an ethnomusicology class, I think. And I was given the chance to do a topic, to pick something, and I wrote about Ellington's arrangement of Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker Suite. That was fascinating. I'm working on a plan right now to somehow bring that to life at the museum. I think that would be beautifully danced, beautifully played in the theater. When it's possible. I don't know if that's ever going to be possible again, but I sure do hope so. I miss dancing. So I was learning. I was mastering this world of singing, of oratorio, and of opera. classical music, of Baroque music, of Renaissance music, of what I learned is called serious music. And I think I rested with the term serious music for a while, and I didn't really think of it until one professor pointed out, or was teaching a lesson on Leonard Bernstein. Love him. Love Bernstein, love him. Sondheim, love that, all of that situation. But I was learning about Bernstein, a young man, you know, starting to really make a name for himself in the world of music, and decides to visit Broadway and write West Side Story with Sondheim, and received nothing but criticism for it, for having left the world of serious music. And I think that really put a bad taste in my mouth. Not because my teacher was teaching me this lesson, and not, I don't know, nothing against the teacher either, or music in general, but I didn't like feeling like I was walking down a path that was putting me in a world where I had to separate myself from what was thought of as not serious music, anything but serious music. I even had an experience with one of my teachers discovering me, listening to Al Jarreau. That's what I was listening to, doing some work, planning a tour somewhere. And they came into the room and they said something like, you know, I'm used to walking by here and listening to very, very nice music, and now I hear you're playing this garbage. And they left. And I don't think they meant to harm me in any way, but they certainly did. And that experience really was the first moment I thought I might be on the wrong path. Now, while that's true, I'm still who I always have been. In fact, I'm planning something for you all coming up soon where I'll get to use this voice I've described to you in a First Friday show. Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait. Kathy Armistead at her organ. Be ready to weep. It's going to be so moving. So after that experience, got off topic, I went on to really dive deeper into this world of jazz music, in this world of rhythm and blues music I hadn't really been looking into too much. The world of hip hop, the world of contemporary music, the world of rock and roll, the world of country, the world of what was called world music, but I just think of as music just because it came from someplace else in the world doesn't give me the right to force it to be called something else. You know, it's all music. And I was discovering it. I was discovering what was going on in Africa, and I was discovering what was going on in Latin America, and I was discovering what was going on in Asia, and my teachers had not been giving me this information, and I felt so robbed then, and I began to feel bitter then. And then I realized, why? I can teach myself. I can read. I have access to any book I could want. By this time, the internet was existing pretty strong. I know I look good, but I'm a little older than you may think. The internet wasn't always here. And my eyes were open. And because my eyes were open, my ears were open. And because my eyes and my ears were open, my mind was growing. And with this new, large, expanded, developing, evolving mind of mine, my fingers too needed to evolve. My hand as a conductor needed to evolve. My pen as a composer needed to evolve. And so I had to break myself from music. I even made a grand announcement, foolish as it may have been, that I wouldn't be singing anymore. And I meant it at that time. No longer do. And I took that brief time where I wasn't a musician anymore, and I just read and I just studied, and I picked things that I needed to focus on to develop what I was imagining myself to be as an artist. And so I looked at singers like I had in the past and decided who was really teaching me something, who could I really stick with, who am I really grappling with. composers, who am I really grappling with? Instrumentalists, who's really doing something great? And I held on to them. And then I decided I didn't know enough, so I began looking for the new music, the new sounds that I had not yet discovered. And shamefully, those new things, not shamefully, I'm not ashamed of that. I said that wrong. Surprisingly, not even regretfully, just how did that even happen? But those new sounds I was beginning to develop and work into my mind, into my finger, were very well-known, beautiful sounds like Billy Joel. You know, that's somebody that I was discovering then. The Who, I was discovering them at that time. And those new sounds for me were impressive because I was hearing, I'm a percussionist myself, I'm a lot of things. Percussionist is one. As a percussionist, that rhythmic side of my brain opened when I began to listen more thoughtfully, more closely to the work a drummer in a band was doing. I played in plenty of jazz bands and plenty of bands at all. I played the beat, but I had never really studied it. It was just what I was feeling. But listening to, it was Zach Starkey playing the first time I heard the Who play. So clearly it wasn't the original iteration of the band, but listening to the way he played was incredible. Listening to the way the guitars were being used and the synthesizers were being used to create individual sounds that came together to be that music fascinated me. I mean, I'd heard these sounds before, but I'd never really stopped to think about the technical side of what I was listening to and the great and grand work that had to go into creating not only the sound, but the idea that would lead you to this sound. And that began to remind me of the work of Bach, you know, helping to create what music became, or Beethoven, helping to stretch those things that Bach helped us put in place to their limits, forcing us to think in new ways of how to use these rules of music, or how to break those rules most effectively. And that reminded me then of the birth of jazz. That was reminding me, it reminds me still today. In fact, I hope to be teaching a class on this next year, just one, on improvisation. But what is improvisation when it's called ornamentation? How are they the same thing? Where did they come from? And I had already learned how to control an ornament, or how to create an ornament, or how to think about an ornament, or where it's appropriate to place an ornament within Baroque music and music to follow. But I'm thinking particularly about the Baroque. Si Trajepi, a great example of when to sing a melody line and then accentuate it with some ornaments as you come back to that melody line. Si Trajepi le ritorte la mia feri splendera. Beautiful Handel piece of music. And there are certainly definitive rules in Baroque music when we talk about ornaments, when to use them, what to do in some places, but it's really about the creativity of the singer or of the violinist or whoever it is, whatever it is. And ornaments last and live in music still, and then jazz comes. And ornaments are now improvisation. The early jazz musicians did not have the vocabulary to say ornamentation. You know, it's, like Jeremy was saying, it's the result of growing up or existing in a world and in a society that does not allow you access to things they allow everyone else. You know, not being able to read, not being allowed to read or to write or to study or to learn, passing things down through the oral tradition landed these musicians at ornaments, not knowing where they were, calling it improvisation, as history labels it improvisation. And it's very different. The improvisation of jazz can often happen throughout music, right? You know, maybe you think about Nina Simone playing and improvising Love Me or Leave Me, you know, improvising Cinnamon, improvising Pirate Jenny, you know, just playing through what's coming to her tips of her fingers, skilled musician as she is, or somebody like Duke Ellington improvising. And you think about how how wild those improvisations can get. Today's modern singers, I think they call it runs still. My cousin BJ, boy, that cousin, those runs that he can create, that improvisation, those ornaments, quick, smooth, fast, flipping and turning and holding on to notes where appropriate. I can do the same thing, but the way he does it is just so skillful. Reminds me of reading stories about Vivaldi, playing his violin. Great composer, just as good, if not better, a violinist, that man. And he could play, and by some accounts, his ornaments, his flourishing it was maybe even a little too much. Just very flamboyant in the way he played. Just could give you all of it. And BJ can do that with his voice, and so too can the singer. In the Baroque music, we also talk about bel canto, and the singer gets not the responsibility, but the opportunity to show off their talent and their skill. Jazz singers, too, took that opportunity. We see that with, the great scatting of Ella Fitzgerald, or the really very simple and well-placed playing and scatting of Louis Armstrong. We see Al Jarreau, another great. In fact, Spain, Blue Rondo a la Turk. If you don't know those, Al Jarreau, Spain, Blue Rondo a la Turk. First jazz piece I ever performed in Richmond was Spain, actually, with Rudy Faulkner and friends. What was the name? Milestone, little jazz club, no longer exists, I don't think. But that sort of has been my journey through music. Finding jazz, discovering it, grappling with it, continuing to learn what it is, how it works, who plays it, who sings it. That's my love for music. That's my love for jazz. It reminds me of evolving personally. It reminds me of becoming somebody new. When I took this job, I'll go back to make a little personal with VMFA, I said to everyone who interviewed me, and there were many, that I do want this position, but that I was not interested in this position if I didn't stand to learn something in doing this job. And I think they heard me say that, because I have learned so much. Even today, speaking with you from your homes, and me alone in this museum, room in a museum, a building, a campus that houses treasure. I miss being able to share that with as many of you as I once could. But I'm learning. I'm 36 years old, and I like to say right now, I've spent 36 years becoming a great stage performer, and I am. I'm proud of that about myself. I'm confident. I didn't spend much time learning how to be virtual. I didn't spend much time learning how to produce television or film. And while we live on the internet, I'm still living with cameras and with lights and with wires, and I'm accustomed to seeing your faces just beyond this piano I'm sitting at. I'm accustomed to seeing your smiles and your eyes. I'm accustomed to getting up, shaking a hand, squeezing a little hug on you. Maybe we'll get in a dance together. One day soon, someday soon. I feel very blessed as well to be able to do this. And that brings me to this piece of music that I want to share with you tonight. I talked to you earlier about my dear cousin Victor, Uncle Victor as well. Vic, who we spoke to last week, the great guitar player, great songwriter, and a great singer. And at one point in his life, he, as far as the story I know, he had something he needed to say. He needed to get out of him, out of his mind and out of his heart. And he picked up a guitar, a pen, and a piece of paper. And he wrote these words. Oh, Mr. Miracle, excuse me, please. I'm down here trying to figure out what went wrong with my life. Time and time again, I tried to work it out. But sometimes I fail. Your love, it still prevails. Mr. Miracle, make a miracle out of me. Out of me, out of me. Mr. Miracle, all my life I searched around both high and low, looking for someone to help me out, but there's no doubt you're the only one. Come on, rescue me. Oh Lord, I still believe. Mr. Miracle, make a miracle out of me. Already I feel a change in my life. Lose all my misery, all of my strife. I looked but didn't see, really could not conceive. Oh, but now don't you know I believe. Oh, Mr. Miracle, finally found someone to share, always be there through the darkness in my whole life. Oh Lord, you're the miracle all in my life. Come on, rescue me. Oh Lord, I still believe. Mr. Miracle, make a miracle out of me. Already I feel, Lord, a change in my life. Well, lose all my misery, all of my strife. Well, I looked but didn't see, really could not conceive. Oh, but now don't you know I believe. And hey, Mr. Miracle, oh Lord, I finally found someone to share, always be there through the darkness in my whole life. Oh Lord, you're the miracle all in my life. Come on, rescue me. Oh Lord, I still believe. Mr. Miracle, make a miracle out of me. Mr. Miracle, Mr. Miracle, please tell me, Mr. Miracle, won't you make a miracle, love, of me? Oh, Mr. Miracle, make a miracle out of me. I think that is every artist's every musician's thought makes something great out of me. Mr. Miracle, is that art itself to you, the muses, the universe, nature, your own self, whatever belief system you subscribe to, whatever's in your heart, whatever's in your mind, however you love with me, however you love with the world around you and with those in your life. There's a miracle in all of us, I think. I think there's one in me. I believe that. I believe I'm living through that miracle every time I take a breath in and every time I release that breath out. My eyes blink, my heart beats. And I think the same of you, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you do. Do it with love. Do it with positivity. Do it together. You know, life is boring without variety. I used to work for somebody who once said to me, she recognizes that there are great joys in life, and she doesn't want to regret not having lived through those joys. And that opened up my world so much when I allowed myself to just embrace joy and love as it comes to me, as it's healthy for me and those around me. And if it's good, it's just good. Whether I've ever seen it, felt it, smelled it, touched it, tasted, heard it before myself, when it's good, baby, it's good. And I'm telling you, there's a whole lot of good out there. Well, that's all I've got for you tonight. As always, thank you for hanging with me. Thank you for loving with me, putting up with me and listening to me. I can't wait to be with you some more in the future. And I promise you're not gonna have to listen to my voice too much more in the future next week. You know, if I come back to you next week, and I think I should, we'll have a guest, we'll have some more music. And then after that, we're going to go down the journey through protest music in a proper form. But I think we're going to look then at the impact women have had and continue to have on music and on history and on the development of art and the experiencing and learning and teaching and cultivating of it. I think that's a very beautiful moment to go down. And then we will wrap up this first virtual jazz season, we'll call it, with, I can't wait. We're gonna look very much more deeper into the music and catalog and impact of, I've said her name a lot, of Nina Simone. The first time we'll have a band back with us. Oh, y'all better tune in. September 3. I mean, every Thursday there's gonna be one. September 3 is gonna be the series finale, and y'all better call everybody you know and have them tune into that. New time on that one, 7 p.m. So stay tuned for our information and our postings. Check out what we're doing with our First Fridays, our Dance After Work on Third Fridays, our Summer Breeze series. You know, we're still here for you. Our lectures and our tours and our art activities that we have coming up, all virtual, all offerings from Virginia Museum of Fine Arts and from my very talented, very smart, very skilled, very prepared and organized peers and programmers. I'm looking up to y'all. Gotta be a little bit more like you all sometime. But for tonight, for this evening, this has been the Dominion Energy Jazz Cafe virtual series from the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts in Richmond, Virginia. Thank you again for loving with us. Good night.